forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And we have returned after a 1-week hiatus. Welcome back here to Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace alongside, by now you know the drill, my co-host and absolutely never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well, despite the fact that it's freezing rain/snow. It's some sort of mysterious precipitation. I guess I could just go outside the studio and look. I'm doing well because, one, pitchers and catchers reporting soon, or at least not already, seeing more and more commercials on the television for what? The Masters, which means that it's very, very close to actually warming up out of the winter. It's a wonderland in December, wasteland like 2 days after the New Year's hit. So I'm doing well.
Shamrock Shakes are in.
Yeah.
The madness is about to begin. So yeah, it's a great time of year. And of course, that means let's talk football. Because as crazy as it sounds, spring football is underway. This is your spring football preview episode of Bigger Ten. Before you're like, hey guys, it's still February, guys. The two-time reigning Big Ten champion Michigan Wolverines, and I love saying that, so I'm going to say it again. The two-time reigning Big Ten champion Michigan Wolverines open spring practice on Monday. And so since they're the pace car right now, Aaron, they determine when spring practice begins. So I have embarked upon the task of what I think are the top 5 storylines in our league heading into spring ball. Let's tackle each of these one by one. And to me, this first one is number one all by itself. It's in a tier all by itself. And that is the beginning of the Drew Allar era at quarterback for Penn State. Why do I put that in a tier by itself? Have you seen Bill Connolly's first S&P projections for 2023? Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Michigan. But those teams are so close that with the home field advantage, Michigan would actually be favored in the game. Okay, so even though Ohio State is slightly ahead of Michigan in his overall projections, Michigan and Georgia are the only 2 teams that are right now favored in every game, according to SP Plus and his projections, his first for 2023. But you see who's ranked number 5? Penn State. That's right. 3 of the top 5 teams in SP Plus projections for the upcoming year are out of the Big Ten, and not just the Big Ten East, and they're all going to play each other. So to me, when you look overall at the team Penn State has returning, yes, we know Ohio State is going to have to replace a quarterback, but they've been on a decent run of replacing quarterbacks recently, as I recall, right? They're now going to have 3 straight first-round draft picks at quarterback. Whoever takes over there, Kyle McCord, is it Devin Brown, I want to say, is the other player. Yep. That guy's going to inherit, Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe the best receiving core in the country. I think they're going to be okay. Michigan, of course, brings back J.J. McCarthy, who took his step forward a year ago and is the clear starter there for the Wolverines. The question is the 5-star Drew Allar, whose game's a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger. He is mobile, but more of a lumbering way. Big fella, big arm. We saw him in spot duty last year, filling in for Sean Clifford, but there was never really a time all season where he was in the game with the game on the line and in his hands. So how quickly is he ready to step into that breach, I think could very well determine the entire complexion of this conference. That's why I rated it number 1.
And I would agree with that. And I would say this as well. If you're watching Penn State spring practice or spring game, whatever they have there, I think you can glean a little bit about what you're getting into when it comes to handing over the reins to Drew Allar. Or Allar, I should say. I liken this to kind of the Brock Purdy situation in San Francisco. So he comes in off the bench, third-string quarterback, as you know. Everybody within the sound of my voice knows this, especially if you're in Pennsylvania and watched them actually absolutely get trounced in the NFC Championship game. He comes in off the bench. He has a great game. Then he puts together 2 or 3 games. And everybody in our home state of Iowa is giving Brock Purdy the absolute slurp fest because he was the quarterback for the Iowa State Cyclones, partly because of that and partly because it's the NFL. Let's give this guy a few weeks before we announce anoint him the second coming of Joe Montana. I was just like, let's pump the brakes here. Let's just see once an NFL defense or defenses get 3 or 4 weeks of tape on him. Let's see what he can actually do. And he kept winning games and kept making plays. And the reason I say that is because in the NFL, more than any other level that this sport is played on, defenses don't really need that long of a time to expose any weakness that you have. And by the 6th game that he had won, we know that Brock Purdy has a very high floor. We just don't know how high of a ceiling he has. But if there was something in his game in that 6-game span that would scream out to you and say, what are we doing here? This is kind of a weakness. It was going to be exposed within 3 or 4 games, and that just didn't happen. So he has a very high floor. On a microcosmic level, I think that's what you can look to if you get any content or video out of spring practice. If Drew Allar is, tripping all over himself, can't get the ball out on time, like any time, or anything that's just alarm bells, you might want to pump the brakes on the Penn State train. I don't think that's going to happen because he does have a little bit of game experience. And in the college game, if you've got a big arm, you can do, you've already got that going for you, even if you don't have all the X's and O's and reads down quite yet. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic if I'm a Penn State fan, but we'll see more once we get a little bit more content out of Happy Valley in spring practice.
Very well. Let's get to issue 2. Speaking of quarterback battles, it's the race to see who will be the next first-round draft pick at quarterback for Ohio State, and then who will end up in the transfer portal. I mentioned the last 3 Ohio State quarterbacks have been first-round draft picks. And, oh, by the way, in between those guys was another guy better than all of them who was the number 1 pick in the draft, had arguably the greatest season of any football player in college football history, and has already been to a Super Bowl, Joe Burrow. All right, so this school knows how to recruit quarterbacks, knows how to develop quarterbacks. So C.J. Stroud was incredible in that final game against Georgia. You heard this Michigan fan say that might be the best game I've ever seen an Ohio State quarterback play ever. That being said, I think, when you look at Emeka, I always forget how to pronounce his last name, and then Marvin Harrison Jr., the rest of the receiving core, I think whoever takes over has quite the array of weapons, can still turn around, hand the ball off to weapons like Travion Henderson, provided he's healthy as well. So Devin Brown and Kyle McCord will battle it out this spring. Both of these guys, very highly touted recruits, and I would imagine at worst, given the talent around him and the scheme they'll be in, we'll probably think that guy, if he wants to come out, is at worst a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, or maybe a 1st round pick 1 year from now. And then the question is, can Ryan Day massage this competition enough that the other guy doesn't transfer so you have nothing behind him? But I think that's really the only thing I'd be worried about if I were a Buckeye. It's not which of these 2 guys will start and will they be good enough. It's will the other guy then leave and then kind of leave us barren behind that guy.
My entire life, certainly my entire adult life, I mean, as you kind of alluded to there or mentioned, Ohio State and quarterbacks, it's like, well, who's the lead singer of the Beatles tonight in concert? Is it John Lennon or Paul McCartney? Oh, I'm going to clutch my pearls. No, you're not.
Oh, crap, you might have to settle for George Harrison.
No, that just doesn't happen. You're right. The only story here, so this is not a story, in my opinion, with this program until it is, and you come out with a quarterback who can't hit the broadside of a barn. That has not happened, so it's not really a story to me until it actually is. So, yeah, you're right. The story is, can you actually get one of these guys to stick around? The Jalen Hurts of the world, just the consummate teammates, and maybe both of these guys might be. It's just the day and age we're living in. They have to do what's right for them. But the Jalen Hurts type of character where, you know what, I committed to this team, I'm sticking through it through this season, those are few and far between. So I would hope, and that's really all you got right now. I'd hope if I'm a Buckeye fan, maybe our 3rd stringer is really, really good too and has some magic in him. Otherwise, that's where we are in college football. I don't like it. Most of you listening probably don't like it. It used to be, even I remember. I remember. You commit to a team, you commit to a team. That's just not, as you know, that's just not the way it goes. So that is truly the story, not whether or not they're going to have a competent quarterback, because they always do.
Story number 3. I think this is the biggest attempt to transform one of the upper echelon programs in our league since Michigan hired Rich Rod. And we know how that turned out. Now, the difference is here, there's more administrative support now that Barry Alvarez is basically retired, moved on. There's more administrative support for what Luke Fickell is attempting to do here. Fickell also is from this part of the country, knows a lot more about what he's getting himself into, as opposed to Rich Rod, who obviously came from West Virginia, and this was all foreign to him. So there's some advantages that Luke Fickell has that Rich Rod did not. But keep in mind, Rich Rodriguez was the #1 coaching prospect in the sport for several years when Michigan landed him. He had turned down Alabama the year before. That's how Nick Saban ended up there to begin with. And he was certainly, even as highly touted as Luke Fickell is right now, he was maybe even more singularly coveted than Luke Fickell was. This will not be an easy task. He's going to go to a part of the country where the style of football that Barry Alvarez, Aaron, wanted to play plays right into the kinds of players like linemen that are readily available, okay? And now they're going to open it up. And it's not just going to be we're going to open it up then run the ball 300 times, in a spread like what Michigan does. They brought in Robert Longo, the offensive coordinator from North Carolina, and you saw what he did there with Sam Howell. They brought in a quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, who has 80-plus career touchdown passes. He had options, guys, especially with NIL. He could have gone somewhere else. So he ain't coming here to turn around and hand the ball to Braylon Allen 50 times. In fact, Braylon Allen's out there tweeting, hey, they're not going to have to friggin' hand it to me 50 times a game anymore. He's excited. So I am really curious to see how this transformation, especially on the brink of bringing in USC and UCLA and going divisionless a year from now. So there is no margin for error for Wisconsin. Luke Fickell's got to stick the landing here.
Yeah, if this were Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State, just all the same roles and storylines just applied to them instead of Wisconsin, this would probably be the #1 story in our conference, regardless of where one of the big three are ranked, just because of all the factors that you mentioned there. And that's a point that I've tried to make in the past. Luke Fickell, if he were brought on to coach at Baylor or Texas Christian or SMU, I think he's going to be able to have a better chance more consistently to play the game the way he wants to play it because of the players that are available in that part of the country. Just a lot more skill position talent down south than there is available locally to him. However, also as you said, he's put together so far a pretty decent team, by all accounts, on paper, looks the way a Luke Fickell team wants to look. The only other thing I'll say about this, too, is the game of chess or game of risk that is the Big Ten right now. It is interesting. You have made similar comments about Michigan playing Jim Harbaugh Stanford style of ball and kind of sucking some of the oxygen out of the Wisconsins and Iowas of the world. That contrast in styles, maybe the last couple of seasons, is really what's put them over the top against Ohio State. Mm-hmm. You look at this game of chess as well, as Michigan has ascended back into the big dogs of the Big Ten again. There's always been Wisconsin or, less often Iowa, kind of that #2 team in the other division that's able to kind of give these guys a fight. I wonder if Wisconsin, maybe by chance, or maybe this was a calculated decision on the part of that athletic director. Hey, we got to find our niche again. Michigan's kind of taken this away from us. We're never going to be able to compete at their level because we don't get the kind of recruits that they do. Let's zig when they zag. That is kind of fascinating to me. I don't know if that's on purpose, but when you look at this giant game of, just program chess in the Big Ten, I think that is something to watch.
From one coach arriving on the scene and trying to transform a program to another coach, just trying to survive at this point. And I'm always going to be a Pat Fitzgerald groupie. I think he's a dude, right? Man's man, great leader of men. But I got to tell you, I don't know what the path back for them is. They didn't win a game on this continent last year, Aaron. They won one game. It was the week 0 game in Ireland against Nebraska. That's the only game Northwestern lost last year. A lot of their best players, for whatever that's worth, like Pete Skoronski and Evan Pryor, those guys went pro. So I don't know where they're going from here. I mean, this is maybe the most in-depth rebuilding job a coach within his own program has had to perform in the Big Ten that I can ever recall. We saw Iowa take a bit of a dip after it peaked under Hayden Fry, and he brought them back. They didn't crater, though, okay? They had one crappy year in 1989 where they had a losing record, and they dipped, and he brought them right back, or they were in the Rose Bowl the next year. The aforementioned Barry Alvarez had a dip after he built them to ascendancy. Wisconsin had a bit of a dip. Then he brought him all the way back to the ascendancy again in the Ron Dayne era. So we've seen guys reboot after a dip or a market correction. I don't recall a coach who built a program, saw it freaking nuclear winter, like nuclear winter, crater, Francis P. Denny Green level Northwestern stuff, and now is going to try to rebuild it back again on the fly. I don't know, man. I don't want to doubt my boy Fitz. I'm doubting my boy Fitz. Aaron.
I will take my best stab at answering the question, where does Northwestern go? Because you're right, it has cratered right now. And I'm going to completely rip you off when you're asked, hey, who should Nebraska, who should fill in the blank, once great team with not a great recruiting base, should they hire? Triple option service academy. That's what I would start doing. That's what I would start doing if I were Pat Fitzgerald offensively. Will he ever do that? I don't think so. But here's the reality for Northwestern. You have been the redheaded stepchild, despite the success that you have had. You've been the redheaded stepchild of the Big Ten forever. Nobody really cares about you. Smallest probably fan base and alumni base in the conference. Your administration has absolutely zero incentive to alter admittance standards for athletes, and will have even less incentive once the new TV deal kicks in. It has absolutely less. You're going to be making a ton of money, just like every other Big Ten school. So who cares? Who cares about the football team? So here's what I would do if I were that athletic department. This seems really crazy, but hear me out. Once you get that new soccer stadium built, I would, if I were the athletic department.
That's the football stadium you're referring to.
Yeah. Once they build that new soccer stadium that they're going to be playing football in, I would make the entire lower bowl all student section. You get in for free. Make that place. Not only do we have to come when we go on the road at Evanston, we have to come and prepare for the triple option, and the lower bowl is all students, or at least 75%, something like that. And then develop your own weird traditions that it's just a really funky place to play. That's what I would do. I'm grasping at straws here, as you can hear.
Well, let's get to the final. I don't know where they go. I don't know how they rebuild. It's a long road back for Fitz and Northwestern. Let's talk transfer quarterbacks as we wrap up our top 5 spring football storylines in the Big Ten. 5 transfer quarterbacks likely taking over as the starters for their team this fall. We'll get our first look at these 5 guys. Of course, we're talking about Cade McNamara at Iowa, Hudson Card at Purdue, Jeff Sims at Nebraska, Luke Altmaier at Illinois, and Taven Jackson at Indiana coming in from Tennessee. Of all those guys, given where their program is at, McNamara has the most hype because it's considered that he's kind of the missing link for that program. But there's a baseline of success that Iowa's program has established. Illinois is trying to establish that right now under Brett Bielema. It has gone over its win total his first 2 years there. So Tommy DeVito was a revelation as a transfer, kind of a cast-off at Syracuse. He was a revelation coming in, stabilizing that position, and by the end of the year was a bit of a playmaker. Luke Altmaier lost this job at Ole Miss, lost the starting quarterback battle to Jackson Dart a year ago, was a somewhat highly recruited player. Illinois is trying to establish its identity. Like if Cade McNamara comes in and he's okay, I could still see Iowa win 8 or 9 games because of Iowa's program is established. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. On the other hand, I could also see if Cade McNamara is great, Iowa wins 8 or 9 games because we kind of know what Iowa's program is. It's just a matter is this the year that, a couple of those turnover breaks go their way and they win 10 or 11 games? Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I think Illinois is trying to establish that right now. So Luke Altmaier has to be really good, at least Tommy DeVito good. And I don't think that, Iowa requires Cade McNamara to be really good. They'd prefer it, but even if he's competent, they'll still be a good football team. If Luke Altmaier is only competent, I don't know that Illinois will be a good football team. And so of the names I just mentioned, and mainly because I'm not thinking that Purdue's going to do much this year with everything it lost and a new coach, I think Luke Altmaier might kind of be the sneaky important name on that list. And Cade McNamara, of course, has gotten a lot of hype, and deservedly so. You don't see, is this the first time ever a guy's won a Big Ten title and transferred to another team in the Big Ten? I don't know that that's ever happened before, but don't sleep on how important Luke Altmaier is at Illinois.
No, that's right. I was going to say Jeff Sims or Luke Altmaier, but at Nebraska, you've got Casey Thompson, I believe, is still back for them. So in Jeff Sims, just for the reason he just kind of seemed random. But I guess I've said this before. Must be something in his game that Matt Rule likes. So that's kind of interesting to me. But yeah, when it comes to Illinois, I talked about the game of chess or risk that the Big Ten is. Now that Wisconsin is kind of changing their identity, here comes ex-Wisconsin coach changing Illinois' identity into being something like a Wisconsin or a Wisconsin Junior under the heyday of Beals. So I think that's interesting to watch. But if Altmaier is not up to snuff, if he is not just average or above average, if he becomes a liability like a la Spencer Petras, although it's really hard to be as bad as Spencer Petras was. But if he becomes a liability, it's going to be a hard watch. It's just going to be a hard watch. It's going to be hard to win. Your defense and your scheme might win you some games or keep you in some games that you otherwise might not be.
You lost that defensive coordinator too.
But you lost him to Purdue. So I think most of Illinois' season is going to hinge on how well their quarterback can play. Breaking news, the quarterback is an important position in the college
salient
football
analysis
game.
here on Bigger Ten.
Yeah, you know what? They don't pay me the mediocre bucks for nothing. But yeah, that is the honest to goodness truth. Unlike Iowa, where there's kind of this expectation here. They darn near went to the title game last year with Spencer Petras at quarterback. At least, though, I will say this about Iowa. At least Brian Ferentz has to put up, 25 points a game now? And that includes defensive scores.
Do you know how many major college football podcasts I've listened to the last few years that are already last few weeks that are already promising they're going to have daily score or weekly scoreboard, episode scoreboard updates on Iowa's point total for the season and how Brian Ferentz is doing? That's how much
I love that.
People are into that contract that we talked about last week. All right, we'll come back. When we do, it'll be our time to play Would You Rather in a moment. Time to play Would You Rather right here on Bigger Ten, Aaron, and it's a spring football flavor from me anyway. My first question is for you. Would you rather be Matt Rule or Ryan Walters this spring, given the state of both of those programs? A lot of roster turnover, although Purdue's coming off its first appearance in the Big Ten championship game. Of course, Nebraska has devolved a primordial ooze at this point. So which of those two guys would you rather be this spring and why?
Matt Rule. I think there's always going to be energy around the Nebraska program in the offseason and before the season. I think you have your baseline start-off point with in terms of talent is always going to be high, almost always going to be higher at Nebraska. At Purdue, you're a defensive coach who has lost basically all of your offense from the season prior. I'm not sure what you do there. I'm not sure what they are going to do. So I would rather be, I think this one's pretty easy for me. I'd rather be Matt Rule. This one is for you. Would you rather have a division winner's future ticket, if that was actually a thing, on Purdue or Penn State? Which one do you think is more likely to win their division next season?
Well, this is going to sound weird, considering Penn State's in the same division as two of what are going to be the top three teams in every preseason poll that were also in the playoff a year ago. I'd rather hold a futures ticket on Penn State. I think there was never a time with Hudson Card that I thought, yeah, that guy can carry a program. A couple times I thought, when Quinn Ewers got hurt last year, he was okay. The previous year when they tried to kind of make him the new guy, went out there and just completely belly flopped against Arkansas and never really recovered. I think Purdue is I think if it weren't for Northwestern, I would probably pick Purdue for the basement of the West. On the other hand, I think Penn State has a team that can absolutely compete to be in the college football playoff. If Drew Allar, I did it now. If Drew Allar is competent, they're at least as good as they were last year. And that, what'd they do? Win 11 games, finish in the top 8, I think. If he is really good, if he's ready to take the J.J. McCarthy step, then, brother, I think you could see 3 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff, and I absolutely, sincerely mean that. I think all 3 could go 11-1. So I'd much rather be holding a futures ticket on Penn State.
All right.
All right, for you, would you rather be Peyton Thorne, Michigan State quarterback, or Talia Tagovailoa, Maryland quarterback this spring? Both of those guys had big seasons in 2021. Both of them saw comprehensive drops statistically across the board in 2022. So which of those guys basically do you think is most poised for a bounce back?
I would rather go with Talia Tagovailoa. I'm more aware of the weapons that he has around him. I believe, Maryland is as much as they possibly can, and I don't mean that to be condescending or faint praise or anything, as much as they possibly can in that division. They are sustaining something, some level of success. I'm not sure what is going on at Michigan State, and we won't know that. We'll have to give that another year or a couple of years. I'm not really sure what's going on there.
If Maryland were in the West, would you pick them to win the division?
I would consider it. I'm not sure.
I think I'd consider it too.
I'm not sure if I'd pick them, but I think they have the least. If they were in the West right now, let's just say you swap out Maryland for Minnesota. Mm-hmm. They have the least amount of question marks, don't they? Going into the season, maybe Iowa has fewer question marks, but
I'd at least put them in the group with Iowa and Wisconsin.
Yep. And
then we'd break down the schedule, and I might not pick them, but I'd probably put them at least in that group, at least to start with.
Yeah, so I think in Maryland as well. I'll just add this. I know you got to get out of here soon, but Maryland, I think that's an argument for. I mean, this is going to be Mike Loxley's 6th or 7th season there. And I think 3 or 4 seasons in, it was kind of, what are we doing here? We've got some great classes. We're not winning a ton of games. Maybe an argument for letting guys stay around, even at a school like Maryland. Stay around, let them build something, and now they're sustaining some modicum of success. Finally, speaking of Maryland and Iowa, would you rather have a college football playoff futures ticket on Iowa or Maryland?
Oh, not even close. I'd rather have it on Iowa. For the opposite reasons of what I just said on the other hand. I mean, Maryland has to go through 3 of the top 5 teams in the country just to get to the Big Ten championship game. In Iowa's case, I think it's absolutely possible that they could have a 2015 kind of season. They have a more favorable schedule this year. I think Cade McNamara could be a stabilizing force there. And I think Eric All could be superior to Sam Laporta if he can stay healthy. That's the big issue. I think he's much more of a downfield vertical threat than Sam Laporta was. And I think the division is this might be overall the weakest I've thought the West Division was going into the season in its final year of existence. So in that case, I think there's a better chance Iowa could have a 2015 kind of year and then just, pull off a one shining moment at Indy than there is that Maryland could get through a 9-game conference schedule ahead of, or even in the same company of Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State.
Makes sense.
All right, we'll come back, wrap things up with Twitter poll results and your feedback of the week next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, what do you think is the most interesting spring football storyline in the Big Ten? And we gave you the top 3 options on our Big 5 list. Majority of you went with Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, 54%, 33% said the Buckeye quarterback battle. 13% only agreed with me that the number one most interesting storyline was the Drew Allar era beginning at Penn State. So you guys had the exact opposite order we did, but that's why we play the games. That brings us to our feedback of the week. Talking about Ohio State basketball, which has been in a complete and total free fall. James Butler writes in our feedback of the week, when they do hit rock bottom, I hope Rick Pitino is there to pick them up. Do you think it is possible Ohio State would hire Rick Pitino, Aaron?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
How even old is he now? Is he 70?
I don't know. Rick Pitino age. I mean, He has been doing his. He has been dispatched to Australia. It's just Australia in this term. Wink, wink is Iona. Rick Pitino. Age. He is 70. He is 70 years old.
Huh.
Does he want to keep coaching? I mean, this is kind of his life. I mean, obviously. I mean, can you see Rick Pitino retiring? If he hasn't yet, when will he? Iona hasn't been that bad, but again, that's a really low level, hard to have sustained success. So I could see Rick Pitino if another big time opportunity, big time meaning in a major conference opens up, I could see him going.
I don't think Ohio State wants to make a change with the recruiting class they have coming in. I also think, though, they've got to win another couple games down the stretch. If you lose out like this, then you're almost forcing their hand if you're Chris Holtmann. So I think Gene Smith would like to retain Chris Holtmann, given the class he has coming in. You don't want to risk blowing that up. But I think Chris has got to help him out here a little bit. I think Gene Smith right now is saying to Chris Holtmann, help me, help you, okay? Like, I'll sit here and take the bullets for bringing you back, but we can't lose out down the stretch, man, okay? We need you to win a couple to kind of take the heat off here. So that would be something, though, if Rick Pitino at age 70 showed up at Ohio State. Wow. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow, whichever applies. However you watch, like here on YouTube, or listen, like on iTunes and elsewhere. We'd love it if you would help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you. Don't forget to also follow us on Twitter in between episodes at Bigger 10 as well. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.